Chapter 1, Lesson 2, Adding Integers. Again, you can see our state standard here, bringing it on in, 7NS1, where we can say we're adding rational numbers. Again, rational. Right now, we're just going to focus in on adding integers, positive and negative numbers. We talked about absolute value. Today, we're going to knock off a few of these other vocab as we take a look at that, and also our skill down here with our word problems and things where we solve mathematical problems using the for operations with rational numbers and solve real-world problems. Let's take a look at that as we look at our vocab. Starting off, opposites. Integers with the same absolute value on opposite sides of 0. So examples of that would be like 10 and, this is my and sign, negative 10. Again, another example would be negative 3. What is the opposite of negative 3? It is positive 3. These guys have the same absolute value, but they're on either side of 0. On opposite sides, or alternate. One's positive, one's negative. As we're looking at this, you can see that comes into play again here a little bit. We talk about additive inverses quick. Something I talk about in class is graphic notes, where I'm going to say that you can do this. Circle up the word additive inverse, draw a little line, and then circle up opposites as well, because point number 1 down here says that another word for opposites is additive inverse. So these two guys are exactly the same. So you got kind of those graphic notes, little visual representation that they're exactly the same. Otherwise, you can see here we've got two numbers with the sum of 0, like we talked about above. 10 plus a negative 10 gives us 0. Thus, they are additive inverses. When you're looking at that, those are great words that they might use on a standardized test like a STAR test or an IXL test or a state standard as well. Give the additive inverse for 4. What's the opposite of 4? Negative 4. So that's all they're going to do. Whatever word they use, opposite or additive inverse, you hear me use opposites a lot. I'll try to use additive inverse as well. Now, there's a lot here on this page that you see all at once. So let's take this kind of chunking at a time. So could you please go ahead and put a bubble cloud around this, or even just circle it up. This is something you've done for a while. You know that when you have two positives and you add them together, you get a bigger positive. So now, please put a dotted line, if you will. Dots going around this guy, or even just a normal circle. Something so that way you can see that this one's a different topic here. When we add two negative numbers, you get a bigger negative. Again, that's in quotes. What I talk about today is money. So if you add two negatives, that's where you're going to owe more money. Usually, previously, we have done this in a lab where we talked about red and yellow chips. When we've done that, we talked about with this, we've got 3 negatives, so 3 red chips, and 12 red chips. When we put them together, we had a total of 15 red chips, red being negative. I talk about it this way as well in class. If you owe me $3, and then today you borrow another $12 from me, you've borrowed $3 and you borrow $12, you have borrowed and owe me a total of $15. Same thing down here, whether you want to think red chips or if you want to think borrowing money, since it's adding, we could say that you borrow $20 from me and then you borrow another 15, you owe me 20, and now you owe me another 15, so you owe me money. Owing Mr. Wall's money is a negative thing, so your answer is negative 35. On your homework, you cannot just make that answer appear. You must have the original problem on there. So you must write all of this in on one line, or however you want to write it in. That must all be there. Again, you had some examples here. Let's talk about it. You've done this before, so we've done 7 plus 13, where again, we could talk money. You bring $7 to school, then you bring $13 to school. You have a total of $20. Or from before, you have your 7 yellow chips, 13 yellow chips. You put them together, you have 20 of them. Either way, however you want to do it, you can look at them. If you know the answer, you need to make sure we remember that this is a negative 13. And previously stated, make sure that you, please, do not just make negative 13 magically appear. All of this needs to be there, the original problem and the answer. Now, if you've done the lab before, and Mr. Walls usually does it, I usually do that before, there's a problem number 17A and B that gets a little bit confusing, but 17B is talking about this. When they have different signs, what happens? So there have been different phrases, and I talk about that in class, but here in the video, I'll just mention what we have here. Find the difference, and then whichever one has the larger absolute value, give it that sign. Here's what we're talking about. Since they are different signs, find the difference. What is 5 minus 2? That gives us 3. Which one has a larger absolute value? Which one's further from 0, 5 or negative 2? The 5 is, thus why your answer is going to be a positive 3. We talked about before in class where we had red chips. So we brought out 5 red chips, and then we added 2 negative chips to it, and we had to cross out those 0 pairs, so we were left with 3 positives. Or again, I talk money in class. Since we're adding, we can do it this way. You bring $5 to school, but you owe Mr. Walls $2. Owing Mr. Walls money is a negative thing, but since you owe only $2 and you have $5, you walk away with $3. You still have $3, and having money is a positive thing. Negative 4 plus 4 gives you 0. In class we talk about it, but there's these 2 words again. This is either called opposites, or they can also be called additive inverses because they add up or sum to 0. Whether you want to think money, you can think money. You owe Mr. Walls $6 because owing me money is a negative thing. But then you bring $4 to school. Can you pay your debt in full? No, you can't. Well, then you owe me money. Owing me money is a negative thing. How much do you owe me? Well, what's the difference between 6 and 4? The answer is negative 2. Down on the bottom, again, if you want to think about 12 yellow chips and then 18 red chips, which one has more chips? The reds do. So it's going to be a negative. How much more? Well, what is 18 minus 12? There might be some larger numbers on your assignment where you might have to do some math on the side. That is a-okay. Just again, remember that when you're doing this, you need to put down the whole problem and the answer. Don't just make that negative 6 magically appear. We're doing this again because we want to be able to talk about adding integers and additive inverses. You can mark those off there if you want to. We've talked about our absolute value already, and we're going to keep working with positive and negative numbers. So let's talk about that here. Find the change in account balance for August. Remember, as we put money into an account, as we deposit money, that means our balance in the bank account goes up. Hopefully you guys will be having a bank account at some point in time. But deposits mean money, the balance is going up. And when you withdraw money, when you take money out of the savings account, when you take money out of the bank, that is a negative because your balance is going down. When you withdraw money, the money in your bank account, that amount goes down, so it's a negative number. It says find the change, so what we're going to do is we're going to add them all together. So when you look in that, add them up. We've got a 40, that first one, plus 35, plus a negative 40. In class, I talk about, let's get to that answer, and we say the answer is 35. You can box that on up. And how do we get there? So some people will look right away, and this property down here that we've talked about a little bit, and we'll talk in class, we've got this additive inverse down here, or the associative property of addition and the commutative property of addition, where we can switch the order we add things, or the associative property of addition, where we can switch grouping. So they see these additive inverses, they see those opposites, so then they say, oh, those add up to 0, we're left with 35. Perfect. Show me that work. Write down this original problem right here, and then that the answer is 35. Great. Other people see that, and they take them 2 at a time. So when we're adding them, we're going to take 2 at a time. We add these guys. We get 75. plus a negative 40. Since they do not have the same sign, there is $70 in your bank account, but you're going to take 40 out. You have more money in your bank account. It has the larger absolute value. So that's why this is a positive 35, because the 75 was positive. But how much more is 75 than 40? Find the difference between them, and that's where we get the $35. So you can take and show me all of this work if you'd like. I just need to see the work that you do. Always show your work. We're doing this again because we have our absolute value that we've marked off. We're doing additive inverse. We're adding integers that are positive and negative numbers. We want to be able to do that with adding. So now we're doing that. Today's goal is that you can say, I can add integers. So you can add two numbers and get an answer. You can show the number and the sum of a number and its opposite is 0, so you can do those additive inverses and then solve real life problems.